And he has no idea. So Ben Rhodes, who's writing a speech, a very ineffectual foreign policy man who just basically is a political hack, is trying to integrate the so-called killing of Osama Bin Laden, which is not true, and what it means for the Middle East, which he has no idea because our intelligence community never picked up the notion that one poor man could put himself on fire in Tunisia and set off a riot in Egypt and then subsequently in Libya and Bahrain. Our real war and the military and the men who are on the ground understand that our real war has nothing to do with Osama bin Laden. That's just what we call a distraction. Our real issue is a fight with Iran right now in Bahrain and in Syria, where Iran is helping the Syrians to suppress many of the dissidents. And this is what's going on. But if we dissect every element of it, what you see right now is you have a civilian government, again, in the White House, who's really not qualified to run international affairs. Forget domestic affairs, because this guy, Tom Donilon, was part of the corruption of Fannie Mae, and how he could have been appointed a national security advisor, a corrupt individual who was a lobbyist for a corrupt institution, as you know, and you've talked about it before. Fannie Mae tells the American president and America this is what we should be believing, while his wife is working for Biden, who also is not the swiftest individual in the world. You have to remember, this is a man who plagiarized many of his speeches long ago and has a problem with a few aneurysms in his head. And now this is what we have controlling the American public, telling us, we, who they consider as dumb rummies, who have to make a living, who have to take two jobs, who have to go to school, as you said, at a very expensive school systems that are ripping us off. And we have to say, listen, it's enough. Take your incompetency, take your nonsense, and get the hell out of here, because we have to have a living. And the major national security problem that every one of my generals knows and every one of my intelligence colleagues understand is the national debt. It is not Osama. It is not anything else but the national debt.
All right, Dr. Pieczenik, we've got a break. Come back, and I want to look at what the banking system's doing and what the Chicago Mafia is mishandling and where you see things going. All right, Dr. Steve Pieczenik is going to be with us for the entire next hour. Very gracious. We got a lot of other issues to cover. But during the break, he's joining us via cell phone, so sometimes he can't hear when I try to cut in, which is fine. That tends to limit my interruptions. But I have a lot of questions I want to get to. I want to get to Libya, his view on what's happening there, where he thinks this whole geopolitical system's going, what's happening in the banking system, the economy, and how to take America back with Dr. Steve Pieczenik. And we'll open the phones up at about 15 into the next hour. Toll-free number to join us. We're opening them up now. Specifically, questions for our guest, 800-259-9231, 800-259-9231, and we'll get you up and on the air. And by the way, first-time callers, I want to do that today. First-time callers for Dr. Steve Pieczenik, 800-259-9231. I'd love to hear from military, people in Black Ops, retired. He was talking about most of his colleagues, formerly intelligence or currently, just say, this is embarrassing us. This is going to discredit everybody. This is too obvious. You got a Chicago, New York mafia that are used to always winning, and they're not even using professionals for their lies, and that's why it's gotten so cartoonish. But I was saying, Doc, you didn't get into the point of, if we're to believe the fable that they just killed him, why, if he didn't resist, capture him and get the intel, and you answered it very succinctly.
Well, what I said is basically when the intelligence community wants to show that they can kill Osama bin Laden, they're basically transmitting the message all over the world to potential terrorists that we can kill you. No matter where you are, where you think you can hide, we'll always find you and we will kill you. Also, we know where you are because of the ostensible information we got from the Osama bin Laden compound. So that's the PSYOPs level of that in terms of warning, threatening, and explaining that we're going to hunt you down no matter where you are.
Now, Doc, how does that square with 9/11 being a false flag and Anwar al-Awlaki, born in the U.S., admittedly hanging out at the Pentagon, Adam Gadon, the fake videos, 4 of the new 5 were old videos?
What it does is it's compounds. The problem of the narrative is when you started it, it should have stopped under the Bush Jr. administration. And I think at some point somebody there would have been smart enough to say, okay, we found Osama Bin Laden. But from the PSYOP's point of view, they needed that story. They, being the administration continuity narrative, needed the story of Osama bin Laden to be alive so that they could justify our military presence in Afghanistan. And you would hear Bush Jr. said, no, we're still out there. Osama's there. I'm going to get him. Well, he didn't get him in that bravado kind of tone. And it was clear, Bush Jr. was not very qualified to get anything, let alone his own position. But then Obama comes in and says, yes, we'll hunt them down, and once we've hunt them down, we will leave Afghanistan. Well, lo and behold, they are leaving Afghanistan, and propitiously, as we say in the intelligence community, suddenly we found Osama bin Laden, and we killed him. Well, the propitious element of the political expediency is the fact that they use this dead body and narrative in order to justify the exit from Afghanistan and Pakistan in that process, which is really a tactical issue. Osama bin Laden's death has no relevance to our strategic position, none whatsoever. Our real strategic position is the withdrawal from Pakistan without creating any trouble, which we have now compounded very seriously. One, thanks to Panetta, who is have been using drones and killing a lot of civilians with a lot of collateral damage. Secondly, because the relationship between the CIA, which created the ISI years ago, while I was in the administration, has been absolutely horrendous, and the Pakistanis have used and been used. And so right now there's a relationship that's going on that's in a marriage that I would characterize like a sadomasochistic relationship. The Pakistanis say, hit me, and then they hit me, and then they go back and they hit the CIA, and the CIA says, why did you hit me? And they hit them back. There's this ongoing game that goes on.
Stay there. Got a break, Doc. We're going to, at the start of the next segment, get Dr. Steve Pieczenik's geopolitical overview, looking at Libya, Syria, other areas, the dollar imploding, commodity prices exploding, dollar in graver danger than euro, Financial Times of London, the big private megabanks stealing trillions of dollars, never such a concentration of banking lawyers and bamboozlers from Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and others nesting in the White House, Obama fiddling while Rome burns, but finishing up with bin Laden. What, doctor, from a psychological warfare perspective, going into their minds, what were they thinking when they did fake situation room photos? What were they thinking when they wrote up this shoddy plan? I mean, was it meant to be so shoddy that people would then debate the shoddy details of the larger issue, or is it as bad as it appears you're saying, and these people are just amateurs? They've got the power, they're leaning on the fact that they're in control, and they think the public is dumb. I mean, what's going on here? Why did they do this?
Well, number one, they do it in order to create a narrative to warn the other potential terrorists around the world that they being units of the special forces, whether it's SEALs or not, there are other equally important, if not more important units, which I won't identify, which are basically creating a story, and I don't want to use the word obfuscate. In other words, they create certain details and narratives that want to not only confuse the American public for many reasons, because they want to justify a narrative for the president, but more importantly, from the intelligence community point of view, they don't want other terrorist groups or other countries to really understand what it is that they're doing or how they did it in terms of coming into a so-called area and acquiring information and creating this storyline, which in fact a whole different storyline might have existed. And that storyline we won't even know, because the intention of PSYOPs and to lie and to create this narrative is to distract other elements outside of this country strategically, either whether it's another country, whether it's Syria, whether it's Iran, to explain to them that if you think we're still ineffectual, I think you better wake up. I mean, if I were to run a story like this and make it so confusing and all, The only element that I would get out of it, if I were in this administration, is to say to the Iranians, listen, we can create this narrative, and maybe it doesn't work too well for the American public, but rest assured that our helicopters, not necessarily the SEALs, but our units are capable of entering into Iran, and they have. I won't tell you which ones, but they've gone into southern Iran, and the Iranians are well aware that we're on the borders of Iraq and Afghanistan to put a lot of pressure on Iran and the Shiites to tell them to cease and desist getting and stirring up the pot in the Middle East, particularly in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. Our major concern right now is the Iranian influence that's in Syria, that's in Hamas, that's in Bahrain, that's in Saudi Arabia. So this kind of a story, although it's not plausible to the United States, and it's not even plausible to future terrorists or potential terrorists, is really a way of denoting to Iran and to our potential enemy, which is really Iran at this point, who is sending out Islamic Revolutionary Guards all over the Middle East, that cease and desist, because we will confront you. And the United States did, under Gates, a very effective Secretary of Defense, help the Saudi Arabians to confront the Iranian agitators in Bahrain, which is near Saudi Arabia, and in the eastern part of Saudi Arabia, to say, we're going to put down this revolution, but we're going to maintain stabilization of the Middle East and not secede it to the Shiites versus the Saudis, because the major strategic partner in all of this is not really Israel as much as it is Saudi Arabia, who's very frightened that if the Shiites get into power, they will be overthrown, and the Shiites within that government, within that nation.
Dr. Pieczenik, we got a break. Let's come back and talk about the larger geopolitical move in the Middle East, North Africa, Libya, where you see things going, then phone calls. Stay with us. We'll get into banking as well. Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.